Hello, my name is Sarah Southey, and you're joining in for today's webinar on resiliency and job searching during COVID-19. So today we'll go through some information about what jobs might be available during this time of crisis, how to switch up your typical job searching style, how to acknowledge mental health during this challenging time, and how to set some goals and routine to make sure that you're going in the right direction and shifting goals as may be necessary. So before we dig into the material, first I'll start with a little bit of background on where I work and a little bit about myself. So I'm an affiliate of the Redpath Center, which is a private mental health organization conveniently located downtown Toronto. The main area of specialization would, of course, be helping people on the autism spectrum, but certainly we support a very neurodiverse population, individuals with mental health issues, and we're engaged in quite a bit of research. There's psychological assessment, occupational therapy, individual family therapy, group therapy, all kinds of different interventions, primarily geared at supporting kids, young youth and young adults, as well as all throughout the life spectrum. Okay, so that's a little bit about the Redpath Center. And there are affiliates like myself located all across the province. I'm personally located out of Mississauga. A little bit about me. So my background is in labor studies and social work. So that's where the piece around employment comes in and is a very special interest of mine because I did study that and have been employment counseling for about 12 years. As well, I do direct therapy with clients around social skills, anxiety, and mental health pieces. And I have 3 kids and a dog. Hopefully we will not hear any of those children today because they're occupied elsewhere in the house, but do bear with me if you hear any screams. So as I mentioned today, the main areas we're going to be focusing on are listed here in the agenda. We're going to start though with a breathing exercise and checking in on different perspectives and mental health at this time, because before the possibility of resetting goals, honing in new skills, it's super, super important that we do a mental health inventory. We make sure that you're in a good place to be doing that. It's certainly a very uncertain time in the world right now, and we're all processing it in different ways. There's a lot of unknowns, and that can typically spike anxiety, spike mental health issues, spike worries and concerns. So before we get into learning and talking about different goals and how to job search, we will start with that breathing exercise now. I also want to let you know that if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to type them, and we will certainly take some live at the end and possibly sooner if there's time. Okay. So a bit of a beach relaxation. We're going to do a visualization exercise that's beach themed. So what I'd like you to do is actually just kind of sit back for a moment and close your eyes a little bit. Take some deep breaths in through your nose. Exhale deeply through your mouth. Breathing at your own pace slowly in through your nose. And exhaling deeply through your mouth. And as you exhale, imagine the tension of your body being released and flowing away. Now imagine yourself walking towards a quiet, inviting beach. You'll notice the white sand stretching along the shoreline as far as you can see. You begin to feel the warmth of sun on your face. And just stand there for a moment in the warmth. Let it flow throughout your body. As you walk in the sand, you feel the warmth on your feet, while at the same time feeling the coolness of the ocean breeze on your skin. You gaze at the ocean and see a deep shade of blue with white crest and waves sweeping towards the shore. You take a moment to watch the beauty of the ocean. You hear the calm breaking of the waves, washing up onto the sand and receding back towards the ocean. Flying back, washing up, flying back, washing up. You listen to the calming rhythm of the waves. Take a deep breath and smell the cleanliness of the salty air and exhale. allowing yourself to appreciate the soothing scent of the ocean air. You begin to walk slowly towards the cool water. As you step in, you can feel the firmness of this wet sand on your feet. Breathing in, breathing out. You begin to leisurely walk along the shoreline. As you walk, you notice a soft beach chair resting lightly in the sand. You lay in the beach chair, taking a deep breath, and enjoy the warmth of the sun, the coolness of the breeze, and the pleasant sound of the waves. Feeling totally relaxed. Breathe in and breathe out. Breathing in and out. When you're ready to return from your vacation, do so slowly. Gently bring your attention back to the room. Maybe a gentle stretch, maybe a yawn, and take a moment just to appreciate how your body may be feeling, how your mind may be feeling, as we now begin to enter into the deeper topics that we're going to be talking about today. So let's dig in, and hopefully you're feeling ready for that. So mental health and emotions. There's many different perspectives that people might be experiencing right now. In my clinical practice, some of the common profiles that I'm hearing about are people feeling difficult, having difficulty getting motivated, feeling more down and depressed than usual, experiencing feelings of hopelessness. So why bother trying to look for work or figure myself out right now? The world's doomed anyway. Types of thinking, thought patterns like that. There's also a lot of confusion. Not sure what tomorrow looks like or next week. So people who were working, maybe are not working, or people who were pretending programs are not anymore, and they're not sure when that will get back to regular. And there's a lot of confusion around that because there are so many unknowns. Also anxious and fearful in general, people are worried for themselves, people are worried for others. And then certainly another perspective that I'm hearing a bit is definitely empathizing for others, but enjoying a bit of a break, right? There can be some possible positives for some in this situation. More than one of my clients has described this current time as an introvert's paradise. Nice to have a little bit of more space from others for a change. And then there's another group of people who life hasn't seemed to change much, because many individuals who relate to ASD are often spending a fair bit of time isolated or on their own. Not everybody, but in certain cases, that's a perspective that's been shared with me as well. So just knowing that it's okay to exist in these spaces right now. These are all normal states of being and our new normal, whatever our new normal is. But it's good to acknowledge how you may be feeling, because as I mentioned before, it's difficult work, goal setting and planning and job searching. It takes a fair bit of mental energy. So doing an inventory on your mental health is super, super important to be doing, to make sure that you're in the space to be moving forward and doing the job searching. So we also know that people who are on the spectrum, there is a higher comorbidity, meaning more likelihood of having more than one diagnosis. So that's another really important thing to mention, is that if you're somebody who's anxious, your anxiety is likely to be triggered in this situation, as we are in a crisis situation, right? And also people on the spectrum find change difficult. So changing to not only to being at home all the time, but possibly changing to having to switch goals and plans right now, going forward, there's a lot of change. So really important to be taking a self-inventory on what that may look like for you. Okay. So the other thing, though, that I want to make sure that you're doing, definitely, you might be anxious. That doesn't mean don't job search. That doesn't mean don't take steps to reset goals. But what it does mean is taking inventory of how you're feeling, and then trying to make sure that you're using mental health strategies to work through some of that. So I know that Autism Ontario, who is hosting this today, thank you, Autism Ontario, is also hosting a series of webinars with a colleague, Stephanie Mosier, and she's doing a lot of work on mental health right now while we're managing through COVID-19. So I have a handful of strategies here today, and certainly it would be a good idea to tune into some of those future webinars too. So some strategies that may be helpful, and feel free to type in and share other strategies that you don't see on this list that you might be using. Send them our way and we'll definitely share them with other listeners today. But positive affirmations are always good. So setting out some positive things, saying them out loud, writing them down, very nice. Talking to family members or friends or professionals as well. Really important, especially because we're maybe not seeing all the people who are in our support circles as much as usual right now. Meditation. So at the end of the presentation, I have some links to some good apps for that, like Headspace and Calm.ca. So I'll make sure that I draw your attention to those at the end. Breathing practices. Of course, we're being encouraged to exercise and get outside and walk while practicing safe social distancing and not going too far from our homes. Keeping a routine. Distraction techniques. So lots of times things like gaming might be considered a distraction technique. Well, certainly that's a good thing to do if you're feeling anxious, but just manage it within a certain amount of time so that you're not endlessly partaking in an activity that ends up turning more into an avoidance pattern versus a strategy to de-escalate anxiety. Yoga, stretching, gratitude practice. So I included a little picture there. It's my kids playing outside, and I was quite happy last week because they finally were playing nicely together and enjoying themselves outside, and I wasn't having to break up fights for a moment. So that was a gratitude moment for me. I just snapped a quick picture of it. And then journaling as well, because it's really normal to process a lot of emotions on any given day right now while we're in this crisis. So writing out some of your thoughts and feelings might be a helpful way to do that. Okay, so job searching during a recession. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about that now. And it's not just any recession. This is different from the average recession because basically our economy came to a screeching halt really, really aggressively. Certainly trends were leaning that way before things shut down, but we haven't experienced as a society in most of our lifetimes this complete halt that we're living with right now. So what I want to say is that job searching for the coming months will be more challenging than usual. I'm reading different articles suggesting that people do not prioritize job searching the way that they usually would, meaning that a lot of places that would typically be hiring are likely not to be hiring right now. Onboarding and taking on a lot of new staff in most businesses in North America is quite a challenging thing to do at the moment. And most human resource departments are more inundated with figuring out and trying to manage supporting their current employees in a different way of working, right? So either they're trying to help with working out layoffs and packaging of people, or they are trying to make sure that everybody is working remotely effectively and being supported, or dealing with extra sick leaves because maybe people have to care for kids and those sorts of things. So job searching is not going to look the same way that it usually would. There's, at this exact moment, probably pretty counterintuitive to be actively applying for many jobs that may be that you may be seeing. Now, if employers are posting, then they are still hiring, right? So it doesn't mean stop looking altogether. But what I'm trying to prepare you for is to not be discouraged if you're not seeing as many job postings as usual right now. And I'm trying to suggest that typical job searching, so looking up jobs online and applying from things that you see online, is probably not going to be the most effective way to find work or a productive use of your time for the next couple of months. With that said, this isn't meant to be all discouraging. There's a lot of good news, and I'll have to come up with a lot of suggestions for you later of other things to be doing and how to be building skills. But with all that said, that right now is not the best time to be aggressively job searching for many reasons. Some good news is that the government has so far deployed an unprecedented amount of relief, of financial relief. And there's no question that opportunities will be available again in the future. During past recessions, the government funds many employment programs and centers in the community as well to help retrain people afterwards or help train people and get them organized. There's certainly been incentives in the past to have people retrain on different, more needed industries. And so that would likely be the case at the end of all this when. And then I just included a link that just was a recent article about hiring and not so much hiring, and that was just from CBC News. Okay, so the typical way that someone would job search would be the best way would be if they're applying internally. So that's the number one way to find work typically. The second best way is networking. The third, and then working with headhunters or temporary agencies is another way, and it's probably actually more effective than job searching online. For parents out there listening, we know that it's very uncommon now to find jobs the way that maybe the baby boomer generation may have found work by actually bringing in applications anywhere. So we don't have to worry about that. That wasn't really effective before, and it's not really an opportunity now anyway. But certainly if you're already working somewhere and you see this as an opportunity for any reason, maybe you're volunteering somewhere and you want to work with that company, then definitely it is a good time to be putting that out there to human resources if you're already involved somewhere. Or certainly job searching online can also still be done if you're using websites like Indeed. You can keep on looking and see where places may be hiring, and certainly apply to positions that you are interested in, but knowing that it's probably going to take a little bit longer than usual. And as I mentioned, you're probably going to see less jobs than usual. So our next slide is going to talk a little bit about the predicted industries that are growing in Canada for 2020. So this was from a handful of sources, and these articles that I pulled from, they were all published in early 2020, so January or February. And this was a look at where industry growth is happening in Canada and where it's predicted to grow for the next year. Now, January and February of 2020 are very different than what April of 2020 obviously looks like now, right? But the general takeaway, I think, from this slide should be that if these industries were likely to be positive and growing beforehand, then likely once things settle, these will be good industries to reconnect. Temporary agencies and recruitment agencies, as the human resources may not be able to satisfy their needs quickly enough. You'll see physical therapists on there, so health professions, certainly. Okay, and another thing that we need to talk about is now looking from a pandemic lens, what jobs will be available. So it's important to think about the fact that not all businesses have failed in this pandemic. Okay, so there are industries that are thriving and growing, and there have been positive shifts. So I mentioned Zoom, conferencing, any kind of online platform. Grocery companies are thriving right now and doing their work differently. So more delivery services, more delivery services, more online services there. And then I mentioned toilet paper companies as well right now. So try to target your jobs to essential services. So in Ontario, the Ford government outlined an initial list of essential services and then revealed a secondary list of essential services. A good practice in terms of thinking ahead, in terms of planning for working in a few months' time from now, would be to think, do the things that I want to do fit anywhere on these essential lists? Because you know that if they do, that those industries are going to continue to be present and continue to, if not thrive, at least survive during this current economy and public health crisis. So definitely it's good to review those lists, and they're very accessible online. So health, grocery, essential services, driving, those sorts of things. And I do mention that also that the idea of essential services is really helpful in the next few months, because we don't know what COVID-19 looks like yet, right? There's talk about different waves of it coming through, and certainly we're on social distancing protocol right now, but this may come through ebbs and flows in the next while, right? So this might happen again after we do ease up on the social distancing policies. We may return to a place where we have to tighten those up again. And if that's the case, that's why it's especially encouraged. Any kind of essential service is especially encouraged, because that way, if you take effort in the short term to find new work, say 6 months from now, and then this comes back in a bigger way, then at least we know that you won't be out of a job again. So that might be effective. And then the other way to target searching right now is employers are going to be looking for positions that add immediate value to the organization. So things that are a necessity in a business. So technology, for example, is pretty crucial to most businesses' existences, and sales in some nature a lot of times too. So what are the types of work that you could be doing for somebody that add immediate value? Some of the extra things may not be as necessary, right? So what adds immediate value? And that's really important to look at. Pay attention also to industries and specific places that have had large layoffs. So maybe you were interested in working in a restaurant beforehand, but didn't have the courage or organization or confidence to apply. Maybe you weren't sure about your skills at that point in time, but maybe you really want to get out and get a dishwasher job. Well, if every restaurant across Ontario and broader in the country have been closed, it doesn't mean that when they reopen that everybody who is laid off will necessarily be going back to those jobs, right? So there will be a need for new hires in a lot of the industries that are completely shut right now, where there have been mass layoffs that are forced. So certainly down the road, if you're looking to get into a market that maybe you were nervous about before or weren't organized enough to be in before, then now it will be a great time in a couple of months to do that. People's plans change, so not everyone will be returning to the types of work that they were doing before. And so I have digital transformation in quotations here. What that means is the digital transformation is what we're currently living within, right? So right now we're doing a webinar as opposed to in-person work around this important topic. So the digital transformation refers to any kind of switch to more online platforms to conduct regular work. So certainly careers in IT are more valuable than ever. Okay. So in getting organized and trying to figure out how you could set new goals and routine, that's going to be where we're going to switch the focus of the conversation now. And as I mentioned before, you may not be traditionally job searching, but what are you doing to stay motivated and to stay on top of your skills and to be ready to return to work or to begin working when we are existing again in a bit more of a typical society? So routine. There's a heck of a lot going on in the world right now that none of us have control over. Creating or maintaining a routine is likely to provide a sense of control over at least one's immediate environment. So some suggestions would be wake up every day at the same time. So that would likely mean setting an alarm. Maybe if you were working before or in school before and needed to be out the door by 7:30 a.m., I'm not suggesting that it has to be quite that early if you're not a natural morning riser, but certainly having a routine and getting out the door, or sorry, not getting out the door, of course not getting out the door, but having a routine and getting your day started in the morning still is a very good idea. So maybe you were out the door by 7:30 before, maybe you're showered and ready to start your day now by 9 a.m., giving yourself a little bit of wiggle room, but not completely flipping your routine upside down so that when things do get back to normal, it'll be a little bit easier to transition again. Just as this transition to social distancing and isolating may have been challenging, it is important to realize that when we do switch back to business as usual, life as usual, that might feel like a big change again. That might feel like another big transition. And there might be parts of the current experience that you're having that you're enjoying, and you may not want to switch all your routines back. So one thing that's important is that you do try to wake up and keep some consistency with what your routine looked like before, some similarities there for sure, so that when there is a transition back, that you're more prepared for that. Another thing that's important about your routine is building in breaks for yourself. So being realistic and about your focus. Just a general suggestion. So as we get more into adding pieces to your routine, it's just important to kind of know yourself and maybe what kind of breaks you might need and how frequently. A lot of people that I work with, I work across from the University of Toronto Mississauga campus. So I see a lot of students and I work with them around developing study patterns and study habits. And it is a really helpful recommendation for them a lot of times to think about breaks. And sometimes they'll say, well, I want to sit down for 3 hours and not take a break until that time. But we know that that's not necessarily realistic, and taking more frequent breaks shorter with maybe set timers is a very good way to work towards goals that may be important for you. So current job seekers may not be seeing as many jobs. We do know that. As I mentioned before, taking a break from the traditional or typical job search might be necessary and helpful. But as I mentioned, it's important not to break your general routine, and you do want to continue to be building skills during this time. So how do you change your goals? So let's talk a little bit about that. Your goals might be looking a little bit differently right now. Your goal may not be to have a summer job secured by May 1st. It may no longer be have a promotion or have a promotion by July 2020. How has life being turned upside down by COVID-19 impacted your goals? It's important to go back to what were your goals if you had your goals organized and written out somehow or planned in some way before, because many people don't really have that much of a set plan either. So this could be new, and this could be the first time you're sitting down to do this. But what are some of your goals? What do those look like? So what we know about SMART goals or that acronym SMART, it's typically a way to make one more accountable to their goals. So I'm going to pull up the handout for a moment here. Here we go, developing SMART goals. So it's available in English and in French. So the first portion of the handout that I have provided everybody with today is looking at what their goals might be and plugging them into a SMART goal. So when you have your goal, you want to make sure that it is something specific and it is measurable. So how will you know when you've achieved? How will you know when the goal is completed? So that's measurable pieces setting things that are very tangible. And then also the T later on is setting a time to it. And achievable. So it's thinking about, is this goal realistic? How do I measure that? Who am I accountable to with it? And what do I need to do to achieve it? Okay, so those are some of the main components out there. And I certainly suggest talking to support people about that. Okay, so activities when you're not job searching. So this is a big important slide because, as I mentioned before, you may not be job searching the way that you were a week ago or a month ago or 6 months ago. Or perhaps you were job searching, but it wasn't that effective anyway before. So what to be doing when you're not job searching? This is just to generally boost your mental health overall. So of course, taking care of yourself, helping with chores, getting outside, activities that aid in understanding of interests, and that's going to be something we'll talk a little bit more about, and activities that aid in labor market understanding. So those are the two big pieces that we're going to break down a lot more, as well as the skill building. So what skills could you be maximizing right now, and how would you approach that? That may end up being your SMART goal. Your SMART goal might be, I'd like to learn a specific skill, and then you would identify what that would look like in your life, and you identify where you're learning it and how you're learning it and setting a timeline around it. Okay, so activities that could be resume building. So this is a good way to focus someone's time right now, seeing how, as I mentioned, a lot of jobs will not actually be available for the coming little while. So even when life returns to normal, it could go a couple of different ways depending on the industry. You could see aggressive and quick hiring, or you might see industries kind of take it a little bit slower getting back into hiring practices, just depending on what human resources and finances look like. So in the meantime, Learning languages is always something that can be helpful. A lot of employers, especially in a multicultural society in which we live, are often looking for additional languages. Online courses are also really available right now in a number of different platforms, which we'll talk about in more detail. And then, of course, non-traditional volunteer opportunities. So you can't be going to your maybe regular volunteer at the retirement homes right now, let's say. But maybe you can plug in different things that you're doing, exercise of kindnesses to your grandparents. Maybe you're calling them regularly, kindness towards your neighbors. Maybe you're helping with grocery delivery or that sort of thing. These are things that in the short term I would be putting on your resume, because they are different things that you may not be doing as frequently, or that you may be doing more frequently now than you may have before, right? But they can certainly be considered volunteer experiences, or, maybe you're doing kind favors for your neighbor, like the groceries, as I mentioned. Well, maybe that neighbor could be a future reference for you now. So that's really important, I think, is the volunteer opportunities, but also the skill building is huge. So one of the main websites that I like for skill building that's quite low in cost is Udemy. I'm not sure if many of you have used that before, used that platform before, but there's a lot of free or very low cost opportunities to train in everything from coding, as I mentioned there, is like a good skill, because we know a lot of IT jobs are popping up or will be popping up. But everything to professional development, even for someone in my industry. I was looking yesterday at it, and there's some great trauma counseling available options from some really high level professionals teaching that out there on Udemy. So I'd say that's a really great place to go ahead and look at as a possible lead for future work. So there's a number of other competitors that do similar work to Udemy. Udemy's been around the longest. I would not discourage you from considering other ones as well. It's just that I'm not as well versed in the number of different options, but Udemy is a really good one. And then if you're looking for, and there's certificate options there. And if you're looking for something even more possibly credible, or more possibly credible and even more resume building, another option is always to consider the continuing education programs that are offered at local colleges and universities. Most of these programs have always had online components to them. So say you were looking to learn a language, definitely that would be an opportunity to do that. And it doesn't need to be at a college or university that might be near where you live, because as I mentioned, like these programs are often always online anyway. So they would continue to be online even when society returns to more of normal looking kind of place. The difference with, and the obstacle with, doing some of the continuing education programs at a college or university might be that there is sometimes costs that would be a bit more prohibitive for some, because it would typically be priced at the same level as what you would pay for a standard college or university course. Maybe a little bit cheaper, but generally you're looking at about $500 for a course. So for some, that's no problem, but for others, it might be a bit of an inhibitor. So certainly there are lots of good free options out there, or very, very low cost options out there, maybe $20 for a course. But certainly the more reputable would be the colleges and universities as a resume builder to actually put something on your resume. And the nice thing about both options is that a lot of times there's opportunity to complete a certificate. So say that you have a certain topic that you want to learn. So maybe it's a computer coding language. There would likely be an option to take a handful of courses, and certainly self-paced a lot of time, but a handful of courses. And then at the end of it, you're walking away with a certificate. Well, that looks even nicer on your resume than just a one-off course. But there's not really a lot of the way that it's set up with the colleges and universities and other online platforms is that you can take a course, and then, if you like it, then maybe you start working towards and taking the other handful of courses, typically 5 or 6, that would help you get a certification. But maybe you take the first one just to kind of get your feet wet and see if you like it or don't. I know a lot of people that I work with have not necessarily been in school for a long time. And sometimes they're nervous about that. Sometimes there's fear that if one didn't have success before, then they may not have success again. But remember that if this was some time ago, you're older, maybe more mature, maybe wiser, and it's being, hopefully if you're taking something, then it's going to be more aligned with your interests than maybe past education has. And also if it's from home, that might make things a little bit easier. I know that a lot of times proper campuses can be overwhelming from a sensory standpoint, definitely, right? So maybe some online programming might be a good next step for you. Okay, so now what we're going to do is look at some cases and talk through a few profiles about how other people have been trying to make a new routine and trying to maximize their employability efforts so that when things are more settled soon, they're ready to go. Okay, so we're going to look first at, I have one more slide for you before we look at the case study. Got a little bit ahead of myself. So activities also, and this is really important, so I'm glad that the screen prompted me to go to this slide. So activities that aid in labor market understanding is another really important component. So say that you've decided that you're not going to take a course right now, but you're not so sure that your job that you had before you got laid off was actually in the right industry for you. Maybe you're feeling a bit of relief that you were laid off and you want to take this time to figure out what else can I do? This slide's about some good information of things that you can be doing to try to figure out the labor market, figure out what next steps might look like. So informational interviews, I'm not sure if anybody has heard of that before. But what those are is when you reach out to people that are in your network, maybe you know them, maybe a family member knows them, and you ask some questions about what they do. We know that individuals who relate to autism spectrum disorder often struggle with theory of mind, which is the perspective-taking component of day-to-day life. So if I burn my eggs in the morning when I'm making breakfast and somebody comes into the room and sees that I burnt eggs, they know that maybe I'm feeling a little bit frustrated or discouraged because my eggs are burnt. Someone with autism spectrum disorder struggles more with that than the average person. How that relates to understanding the labor market and understanding work is that likely somebody on the spectrum might not be able to conceptualize what someone else's work life might look like on a day-to-day basis. So because we have this extra bit of time right now, it's a really good time to research and ask questions and figure out, what do other people do? And would I like doing that, or would I not like doing that? So informational interviews are a great way to do that. What you would do is take a handful of questions that you have and you would ask somebody who is in that industry. So like I said, maybe a family member or friend. So maybe you're kind of interested in law, let's say, and you got laid off from your job as doing stock, but you knew that wasn't going to be for you forever anyway. And you're interested in law, but you don't know if you would like that. You know that sometimes people go to court, but that's all you really know about the industry. Well, if someone that you knew worked at a law firm or was a lawyer, then that would be a good way to connect and try to ask a handful of questions about what they do day to day, what other jobs in the industry might be like, what hours are like, those sorts of things. I know a lot of people I work with do not feel comfortable doing this on their own because it's stepping out of your comfort zone. It's probably talking to someone who you don't talk to often. And it's kind of formal and it's kind of confusing. So certainly I would say if parents and family members are listening, it's something definitely to help your young adult with. Or if you are someone who's interested in doing it, but you don't want to call someone up, that's no problem. A lot of people that I work with, when we do this exercise, we email. So we email a handful of questions to someone that's either in their network or in mine. And then they get their responses that way. And it's really rich. It's a really good way to learn more about what other people do. And then researching companies and industries and specific job titles. So let's say that from your informational interview with your uncle who's a lawyer, let's say that it turns out that you've learned that you definitely don't want to be a lawyer because that is way too many hours and you don't want to do that have that huge responsibility. Let's just say that that's a scenario for the purpose of this exercise. So then maybe you've decided that you like the legal assistant job and you really like working and getting the information, and you're more admin oriented and slightly less social. Then maybe that's something to research a little bit more. So then what you would do is go to ownetonline.org, the website on the slide here, and you would look at the job description. It gives you a lot of detail. So I really recommend this website to learn more about different industries that you're interested in. It gives more information than any other website that I am familiar with. It is American, so it doesn't give us the exact translation to Canada, but our markets are relatively similar. So you find more about that. Then maybe the next thing that you do is plan for future volunteering. So we know that a lot of times, I don't know if many of you have volunteered before, but definitely sometimes when you want to volunteer, it's a process to actually get started on volunteering. Maybe you need a criminal reference check. Maybe the place that you want to volunteer only does training for volunteers a certain number of times a year, those sorts of things. So even though you're likely not to start volunteering during the period of social distancing, it would be a good idea to start researching where and maybe doing some reaching out, filling out a volunteer application form, that sort of thing. Now, definitely depending on the duration of time that we're isolated, you may want to cycle back to that if it does go more than a couple of months. But planning for future volunteering is a good thing. So maybe in this person's situation, they're going to plan to try to do some volunteer work at Legal Aid to learn some more information. Okay, the other thing that you can be doing is researching growth industries. So the few slides back, I had shown you some information on industries that were planning to grow in 2020, the most likely industries of growth. So maybe look a little bit more into those. Maybe think, what's there for me? Another website that I really like is researching companies that value diversity, right? So knowing that you have many wonderful strengths being someone on the spectrum, and knowing that a lot of companies do actively try to seek out individuals who may have differences and may think about things differently and more innovatively. Looking at Canada's top 100 companies that value diversity is probably a good thing to do as well. So I've included that information there. And then the last point around activities that aid in labor market understanding would be to connect with your local employment resource centers. So I'm not sure how many people online today have made that connection before, but in almost every community, there are government-funded resource centers where you can go to job search. And those are for people who have been laid off in some circumstances, and others, they're for students. Other times they are for individuals who have multiple barriers towards finding work. So maybe they have a criminal record, or maybe they are somebody who relates to disability. There's a number of different programs and centers across Ontario that are funded in different ways. What I would encourage you to do is search your community resource directory. Each community would have one, and kind of figure out, hey, who can you connect with? And maybe they're doing things online in the meantime. I know a lot of local employment agencies are trying to, just like everywhere in the world is right now, trying to shift to ways to support their clients online during this difficult time. So definitely looking, just doing a Google search, even Employment Resource Center and your region or your city, that's a good way to figure out who in your community could help. And they're going to have a better sense of local opportunities afterwards when jobs do start to become available again. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you about some case studies. We're going to have a look at Cora first. So she's a 26-year-old who was laid off from retail. She lives alone in her basement apartment. So right now she's feeling very isolated and anxious. She's really worried that her grandmother might get sick, and she's struggling to take care of herself in any way at all. So right now she's spending most of her days actually just looking up statistics. So she keeps hitting the refresh button again and again and again online to learn about the number of cases of infection rising across the world. So she's worried about getting another job in retail. She didn't really even like it to begin with. It was not really the best fit for her. She originally liked the store, but was finding that the social demands were too much and it just wasn't the right fit. So lately she's been sleeping late and wearing the same track pants day after day after day. Don't know if that sounds familiar to any of you right now, but it's an easy pattern to get into at times like this. So she also does have some background in Spanish, and she's wondering about the possibility of a new job in translating documents. She's thinking maybe that's a lead because translating documents isn't really face-to-face work anyway, wondering if that's a possibility. So what do we do for Cora? What can she do? Well, the number one thing in her situation, and the reason why I was stressing so much at the beginning, the mental health component, is before you can do any of this rejigging of your routine, before you can do any new goal setting, it's super important to get back into doing a check-in on your health and mental health. So for her, definitely if she's not kind of doing much more than looking at stats online and kind of hanging out isolated in sweatpants by herself all day, every day, we need to slow things down a little bit for her. And the first priority would be just getting back into showering daily and putting on clean clothes. Doesn't mean she can't put on the track pants again, but just making sure that they're clean, right? So that's the biggest priority. And I want to make sure that anyone listening knows that they need to do an inventory on how they're taking care of themselves first, and be honest about that before the SMART goals that you may make would likely not be successful. Then the next thing Cora needs to do is break down her schedule to find out where she can carve out time to build new skills. So again, if you go back to the handout that we were talking about earlier, there is definitely the information there about what are some of the components. There's some details as to what are common elements of someone's schedule. And then what I'm asking you to do is associate a time increment with that item. So if you know that your morning routine, maybe showering, having breakfast, that takes about an hour, then you want to plug that in on the back side of or on the second page of the document, and list there how many minutes those items take you, so that when you're making a schedule, you can actually make it as realistic as possible. And the more realistic it is, the more honest you are with how long things take you to do and what the things are that you have to do, the more likely you will be able to stick to new things you are trying to build into your routine. Okay, so Cora needs to break down what her current schedule looks like. She needs to carve out time for things like meal preparation, self-care, getting outside of the house, getting some movement and exercise. These are all as important, if not way more important than the job search. But then she's going to build a SMART goal around Spanish. So her SMART goal around Spanish, she might be spending her morning working on Spanish lessons, and then her afternoon further researching different industry opportunities, maybe a more formal education, and then speaking to employers so that she is best prepared to re-enter the market. So a lot of research in the afternoon, a lot of specific skill building in the morning, and then research in the afternoon so that she is most prepared and most targeted for when she's able to jump into job searching again. So a sample routine for Cora might look something like this. Taking her morning from 8 till 9 to do her routine, eating, grooming, leisure, and I add leisure in because definitely you want to make time for, I don't know if it's catching up on Netflix or if it's gaming or if it's reading or whatever it may be, but I'm not suggesting that you don't have time for that in your routine. I'm just suggesting that you make the day modified a little bit so that you are adding time in for that skill building and those research exercises. So then she's doing some chores, so she's spending about 2 hours a day working on the Spanish course. Then she's going to be doing some chores to keep life moving forward, having a lunch and a break, building a lot of time to break, building regular time for break is something I stressed earlier. That's important, so doing that. Then she's spending some time in the afternoon, a big chunk of time in the afternoon, 1 till 3, researching education and job opportunities on translation. So this is new for her. So she's going to be looking, what are the formal types of education most people have who are in that industry? Who hires for these kinds of jobs? Where are these jobs out of? Will they be remote? Who are the main companies? So she's looking into all those things. And then she's definitely taking her evening to do some exercise, do some dinner prep, eat and clean dishes. And then certainly in the evening, somewhere between 7 and 11, maybe even more specific depending on the individual. But for this situation, we said leisure and connect with a family member or a friend, because she, as mentioned before, she does live by herself. So she is quite isolated and she has quite a bit of anxiety right now. So making sure she does have some time to connect with someone, maybe making a call or a FaceTime would be a good thing for her, at least some kind of chat. So that's Cora. We're going to talk about Mavis, and then we'll almost be turning to take questions. So start thinking of your questions while I walk you through Mavis. So Mavis is a 17-year-old high school student. He's currently on a break and wants to treat the time off like a vacation. He's sleeping a lot and he's gaming until late at night. He's frustrated that his summer job plans to work at the local pool are not an option anymore, or may not be an option anymore. He doesn't know what he wants to do long term. So he's struggling to put an effort to the online learning that he's supposed to be doing for school right now. And certainly he's kind of given up on job searching for the summer because he's just discouraged. So what can he do? So he's waking up at 8:30, doing some social media and breakfast. Then he's doing a workout in his home gym. He's someone who has high energy. So he's someone who wants to get that working out and get that energy out early in the day. He identifies as a social guy. So at least getting some physical movement, moving throughout the house, seeing other people in his house is a good thing for him. Then he does his hygiene and has a snack. And then he takes about 2 hours to work on his high school courses. After lunch, he's coming back and he's doing some work on online skills and values assessments, trying to figure out what he might like to do longer term. So for those who aren't sure what they want to do longer term, they're not sure what skills they might like to learn. Well, definitely, I think a great next step would be to tune into next week's webinar on Monday, again from 12 to 1. And what we're actually doing in that one is looking at skills and values more specifically, what you might be good at and what you might like to do. So Mavis in this situation is doing a lot of work on that. He's completing assessment tools. We'll talk more about that next time for sure. And he's actually connecting with a job coach, maybe guidance at his school, that sort of thing. And he's working on a new plan for summer job or volunteer. It might look different, but he's trying to figure out a way to work that. Then he's doing some dog walking because, as I said, he's a physical guy, so getting out twice a day might be good. And then he's doing a little bit of homework in the early evening, more academic related. And then taking some time to eat and relax in the evening for him as well. So just a few last tips before we turn to questions. Definitely using to-do lists is a really good thing, a great way to get started. One, so you can use pen and paper or through an app. Wonderlust and Trello are ones that I recommend quite often and that a lot of people I work with have found helpful. Itemizing what areas are priorities is a really good thing to do too, because sometimes when people write out a list of things they want to learn or look into, it can get quite long and that can be overwhelming. Chunk your time. So go back and use the examples I gave you today with the SMART goals and routine and break down your time that way, and set yourself timers as well. So if you find that you are somebody who could maybe get caught up in a book or in a game and the afternoon could kind of disappear that way, it's good to set yourself timers for your breaks. So I'm going to give myself 20 minutes to read as much as I can of the next chapter is a nice thing to do. And then a strategy from a book that I like, the CBT workbook for perfectionism, is that if you sit down and you can't get started after more than 10 minutes, just say, okay, that's all right. Next, I'll try again a little bit later. Give yourself permission that it's not going to be a successful work session every time you sit down. And perhaps by giving yourself that permission, you might be better able to manage the pressure of work because you may not feel as much pressure. Okay, so these are the resources, particularly around mental health. CAMH has some good resources. There's some Mindfulness Monday information as well. And Huddle is a great online resource for support right now, an online support group. And then Calm and Headspace are the apps that I mentioned that might be helpful around relaxation, breathing, imagery, meditation. And then the websites that you could look into a little bit more if you're really curious about industries that might be growing. These are a few links there for you. Okay, so definitely now is a good time to share, to bring forward any questions if you have any. And otherwise, yeah, that's all I've got for you today. So please do take a moment to send any questions forward that you might have. And I'm here for those. Okay, So the other thing too is that I will be here for the next 4 Mondays. Next Monday we're talking about career interests. So if you don't know what the heck you want to do, and the idea of the goal setting right now is very difficult for you because you're thinking, I have no idea, then tune in next Monday, again from 12 to 1. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about things that you might be good at, how to figure out what you're good at, and also looking at values and figuring out what's important to you. So we're going to do that next week. The week after that, we're going to be looking at resume development. So maybe your SMART goal is to have a resume done by the end of the month. Okay, well then, tune into that. That's 2 weeks from now. The week after that will be interview skills. And our final week will be being social at work, thinking about some of these social implications of work, because I know for a lot of people who are thinking about working or who do work, that's the biggest obstacle for them. So those are the main elements of the webinar series. My contact info is on the front slide. I can try to jump back to that slide here for you, and definitely you can reach out by email. It's a good way to contact me should you have questions about today's presentation or about anything that we talked about, any of the industries. I'm happy to chat. So that's my information there, my email on the slide here. But otherwise, thank you very much for tuning in, and I hope to connect with you again at our next webinar on Monday. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye now.